Wait,
I guess. Wait,
hold on. Wait, no, hold on. I'm sorry. This is triggers forgetting me. Hold on. Bastiat's a smart guy. Hold on. I'm sorry. And then you can go as much as you want. Okay. All right. Okay. Hold on. So the problem is that like when we go down that road where we start like axing out every single part of the life, right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah. So the first slippery slope we run down that you seem to think isn't a slippery slope because it makes sense to go down this road. So we maybe say that we shouldn't loan to them, we shouldn't rent them an apartment, we shouldn't host their internet. If we go full maximum nuclear on that, what about for the types of opinions that a person can have?
How you doing, memers and dreamers?
What's up, Bastiat?
What's up, Basti?
It's good to be here.
Hi,
Basti, we have to talk.
What are we going to talk about?
Whatever that tweet exchange was.
Oh, yeah, the part where you should be able to fire somebody for their political opinions?
Yeah.
Or for being a racist or for any of that? Yeah.
You are such a neoliberal shill hack. How are you going to sit here and defend this one, Bastiat? No fucking way.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy, man.
Okay.
I mean, it's basically the same argument you just made, except you work backward. You obviously got to be able to fire Nazis. Well, if you can fire Nazis... Because they're Nazis. Not only are they walking hostile work environment claims, but they totally bring your...
What if they're an exemplary employee and then they just attend a few neo-Nazi movements after their job? They're off the clock, mate.
Hostile work environment. Like,
listen, you're laughing, okay? But I don't get paid 24/7 by whatever employer I have. Why the f should they have any say in my offline time? Or not offline, I shouldn't say, but like my off-the-clock time.
Look, ultimately, they don't have any quote-unquote say. It's just that if they disagree with your off-the-clock time, they can end the relationship on their end. Just like you can end the relationship on your end at any time.
That shit. I think that's weird.
It's ultimately, I mean, if you, I understand not wanting to be in that kind of situation, but I mean, if you think about the kind of extremism that's out there these days and then just say, well, it's off the clock, so you got to deal with it. No way.
I don't think you're adequately compensated to be a 24/7 representative of your company. I don't agree with that at all. I understand the arguments. I know it'll always be in the unpopular opinion, but like the company doesn't pay you off the clock. Like imagine like where we extend that. Like what if you have some guy that like fucking tells racist jokes in his home or whatever, and that gets like somehow like clipped on like a fucking whatever, like somebody leaves a phone on or whatever. That guy loses his job. That's insane to me. Like the guy's not being paid off the clock. Like if he's a good employee or whatever, then fuck him. They don't have a right to your off the clock time.
I understand the sense of being uncomfortable with this, and I think I read on Reddit that you had said that you recognize that somebody would probably, like the company in this case that we're all talking about, the Central Park case, they probably would have to be compelled just by the size of the outrage to do something about it. Even if they really, don't care that much, they still have to do it because of the size of the outrage that they're dealing with, right? Well, I mean, unfortunately, that just seems to be the way things go sometimes.
No, well, okay, yeah, sure, hold on. So the way things go is an argument for how things are, not how they should be. In its current climate, you absolutely should fucking fire somebody if that shit happens, just because it's too big of a corporate liability, of course, right? From a raw cost analysis, that's obviously true. But I'm just saying that, like, the idea that, like, people are so comfortable that you can be fired for stuff you do off the clock for your job, I don't know. I just think that's, I don't know. I don't think it's weird.
Just to be clear on what my take is not that these people should be fired for being, for having their opinions. I think that's a case-by-case thing. What I'm saying is that the company should have the right to do it, because ultimately, if you do something like that, the company shouldn't then have to go to bat for you.
No, I don't think they should either. People can shit on them if they want. No, I agree with that. That like, here's what I'm curious about, Bastiat, is that like, where does that line stop? So, for instance, like, let's say, like, we'll go full nuclear, okay? Let's say, well, this is what people do, right? They did it. Remember the dentist that killed the lion in whatever fucking country? Yeah. So, like, let's say that I find out that some employees are racist, okay? Let's say that I hunt down where they work, get them fired from their job. They weren't working that day. They weren't whatever, but let's say we hunt them down, fired from their job. Fucking sick. Yeah. What if I find out where they live? Should I be able to pressure, like, the apartment complex that gives them an apartment into not renting to a fucking racist if I find out they're a Nazi or whatever? Should that be a thing?
Yeah.
Really?
It's a free exchange between voluntary people. I mean, the exceptions to that would be the various protected class protections we have. But to the extent that somebody is you're saying, hey, don't engage in voluntary economic transactions with somebody. Yeah.
What if I go out?
There's a natural check on that, though.
There's
a natural check on that because you've got cash right? Somebody is going to want to rent to you. I mean, I know that there are places like San Francisco.
No, but that's not
where
true,
the,
though,
the
right?
market's super skewed or whatever. But for the most part,
No,
I
that's
mean,
not-
if you're willing to pay for having these bad opinions,
No, that's not true. That's not true. That's
yeah.
not true. That's not true, right? We just talked about this. So the reason why that's not true is because this becomes a very quick, like, cost-benefit analysis, right? The cost of your apartment is going to dramatically increase if you renting there is going to bring bad publicity on the company. So for you to rent a place that was $2,000 a month, for the company to, like, recoup the negative publicity that you might bring to that complex where you rent it, you might have to pay $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month to make it up for it, right? So just because you have the money to rent doesn't include that, right? And this is just apartment. What if, for instance, let's say that Experian and Equifax and TransUnion all decided that they wanted to become like more woke. Do you think they should start like giving bad credit scores to people that have like certain like Nazi opinions so people don't give loans to them? Or what about like your ISP? Should they like de-host your internet connection? Yeah, go.
I was thinking about this today, actually. I've been thinking about this a lot recently because, one of the things that always gets me is this notion that Nazis are uniquely bad, but communists, well, they're just kind of misguided. They're not as bad. And I'm inclined to think that, as we go forward in this century and as kind of the anti-China stuff ramps up, a lot of communists, I think, are going to end up dealing with this same kind of situation that Nazis deal with today, where they're going to be publicly named and shamed.
Well, they already did this at one point, right?
I mean, it's gonna be really, yeah. I mean, that's coming back again, I think. And so I was thinking about this, and ultimately, I mean, look, if it's a voluntary transaction, I mean, I just don't think I can't think of a consistent way to say, well, it's no, you can't discriminate against somebody even if they're an extremist when it comes to their political opinions, because I mean, we know. Look, I mean, we all agree that when it comes to these racists like Nazis, yeah, nobody wants to have them around, and you shouldn't be compelled to have them around.
Wait,
the only problem is thinking about, well, what other opinions?
wait,
I guess. Wait, hold on. Wait, no, hold on. I'm sorry. This is triggers the fuck out of me. Hold on. Bastiat is a smart guy. Hold on. I'm sorry. And then you can go as much as you want. Okay. All right. Okay. Hold on. So the problem is that like when we go down that road where we start like axing out every single part of the life, right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah. So the first slippery slope we run down that you seem to think isn't a slippery slope because it makes sense to go down this road. So we maybe say that we shouldn't loan to them, we shouldn't rent them an apartment, we shouldn't host their internet. If we go full maximum nuclear on that, what about for the types of opinions that a person can have? So let's say that we start off this way with like you're a Nazi. What about with you're a Republican?
Yeah. Look, I mean, hey, if I think really what we're talking about is just a different market situation. I mean, there are not going to be as many people who find being a Republican as reprehensible as they find Nazis to be reprehensible. I mean, what we've basically done is, in a way, kind of assigned a cost to a certain belief. If you want to be a Nazi, you can be a Nazi.
But that cost, that cost
costs more to live.
No. Hold on. But not all costs are equal, right? This is a socially enforced cost, not like a real like fundamental cost of a resource or like a cost of a like labor or something, right? This is literally a social cost, right?
Yeah.
So, so we can have influence over this, right? By our attitudes publicly and the amount of social costs that, like for instance, like the social cost of interracial relationships has dramatically decreased, right? It used to be very expensive socially. And even financially, right? But so we're talking about like should we have this type of pressure on people?
Well, I'll say this. I think that where I find the idea that I just expressed troubling is when I work backward and don't kind of skip out on it by saying, well, my exception is all the legally protected classes that we have now, which of course all make a lot of sense. But if you said 100 years ago, if you made the argument I just made 100 years ago, well, this belief is this lifestyle is unpopular, or this political opinion is unpopular. Therefore, it's okay to say don't rent to somebody, who, for example, advocates for integration or something like that. Like I recognize you can think of political opinions where, the thought of discriminating against them is pretty reprehensible. And of course, at one time, it was very popular to do that. But I think that, to address that, you can think of the kind of protected class legislation we have now. It's just that I can't think of a way to apply that fairly or reasonably to political opinions.
Well, I think the reasonable way to apply it would be that, like, I agree in levels of separation. So if you're a Nazi to your fucking landlord and you get evicted, then fuck you. That's on you 100%. If you go to work and you're a fucking Nazi at work, fuck you. You get fired, of course. But if you're like typing some dumb shit on 4chan and you're a Nazi on 4chan and you follow Eric Striker or whatever, if you have a cordial relationship with your landlord, you keep your place clean, if you do a good job at work, you don't discriminate, blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't feel like people should be able to take every single part of your life and then expand that damage that you cause in one section to every other part of your life. That just seems like so crazy to me.
Yeah, I think though that depends on the question of whether you really can separate like being a Nazi from the rest of your life.
Well,
And
but
I
a couple
find
people
that
can all
I
the
find that
time.
to be kind of a skeptical. I'm very skeptical of that.
I mean,
notion.
look,
think
literally,
there's
like
always
the Eric
something
Stryker
wrong
guy
here.
that I debated was literally married to a Jewish woman, so apparently it's possible, right? Or look at Tara McCarthy, isn't she like part Jewish or some shit, and she's like a literal fucking Nazi? Or look at Nick Fuentes, that dude's a fucking Nazi, and his last name is Fuentes, right?
Yeah, but he's also probably rendered himself completely unemployable.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, he probably.
No, yeah,
one
I'm just
reason-
saying that.
I mean, I don't know anything about a specific situation, but I imagine one reason Nick Fuentes is Nick Fuentes is at this point he can't be he can't run the checkout at Kmart anymore. You know.
I'm just
Or
saying that,
whatever he
like,
was doing, you know.
yeah, I guess this is maybe this is an old dog opinion. I'm a big fan of levels of separation, and I'm super uncomfortable that a harm that you commit in one area of your life can bleed over. It's like pissing in the pool of your life, and every single thing becomes tainted and infected. Yeah. That seems
Wait,
so nuclear. Holy
Steve,
shit.
do you want the government to legislate beyond the protected classes we have
No,
now?
no. Hold on. To be very clear, I'm not talking about laws or legislation at all. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm just saying, like, what ought we socially enforce, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, so we
I
have
will say
market
that.
forces right now, which already do that. Right now,
No.
that guy who killed the lion, he could have been like evicted from his place if he wanted to. That protection's not there. It's just no one goes really farther than going after your job.
But they kind of
That's
did
all.
on that guy, right? They were
Like
leaving
that-
things outside of his place of business and everything. They were going like super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was
I mean,
limited
you
to his
showed the
workplace.
tweet today where they were looking up this woman's particular political
Donations,
to
yeah,
find out
holy
which
shit.
candidate she supported.
But you would support
So, I mean,
that, Bastiat.
I mean, look, I do. While I personally find that behavior to be kind of gross, I mean, I absolutely would support the right to do that. Yeah. I mean, and I think
what
really
perspective-
that in a society where we have free speech, like, I advocate the kind of almost unrestricted, with just, exceptions for threats of violence and things like that. I advocate for that general free speech that we have and enjoy in the United States. But the other side of that is that, okay, you can't have a Nazi sent to jail, but you can call their employer and let them know they're a Nazi.
I guess I get
Yeah,
at that point, like, we have
agree.
the difference between like free speech on paper versus effective free speech, right? This is why I think that, as much as I hate to say it, I think there are strong arguments for like nationalizing certain platforms, like either Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Because like, if say you have freedom of speech in the United States for your ideas, but let's say you get banned from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. If you're banned from all these platforms, you're effectively like silenced. You kind of have free speech, but not really, right? Nobody's going to cover you. Nobody's going to hear your shit. Like,
that depends on how you think about it, right? What are they? Are they tools for speaking, or are they just ready-made, prepackaged audiences that you no longer have the right to access?
what's the difference between that and a public square, though? The way you just described as a public square, it's a prepackaged audience that's readily accessible.
There is a difference. The difference to me is this. Facebook has built an audience, and then they give you, by default, which I think is an important thing to remember, by default, free of charge, access to their audience. And then they can take it away from you if they deem you to be a threat to the platform.
Sure, but let's say
right?
the founding...
And so I don't think anybody can be obligated or anybody can be entitled to access to that audience, that thing that Facebook has built. I recognize that in practice, that may make it hard for you to speak as widely as you otherwise would be able to, but I don't think that means you therefore have a right to use their platform. And I think the implications of the government taking that to guarantee that right would be
Yeah,
pretty spooky.
so sure, I kind of understand that it is a bit anti-free speech, but like, let's say that the founding fathers or the Supreme Court is looking at like the public square, right? And they're talking about the importance of anybody can go to the public square and speak, right? Let's say that there was like a private market in a city that was opened up and no one was in the public square anymore. Everybody spent all their time there, right? And we talked about like legislating free speech. Well, at that point, whatever quote unquote free speech exists in society is going to be whatever that private square legislates, whatever they personally as a corporation decide they want there, that's what the free speech is going to be. You've essentially lost it. Now, do you still have the quote-unquote free speech of the public square? Yeah, sure, but nobody's out there anymore. Nobody listens there anymore. So you kind of don't have it anymore, even though you might have it on paper. Like, effectively, your freedom of speech is gone.
Well, I mean, if you're saying that basically your argument is not compelling enough to bring people out from this private square, which, at one point didn't exist, right? People, for example, Facebook hasn't existed forever. There were newspapers on newspapers. We had massive turnover in newspapers for a long time, and now we have this relatively new still kind of online world of expressing opinions. And I doubt that that'll be fixed in place forever too. There may be some antitrust argument against Facebook. That's kind of another issue. But
Yeah,
I don't think that there's I don't think you can say, well, because this private platform has grown so large, therefore you have a right to be on it. And I think it is worth remembering that, I know Facebook and Twitter are pretty big, but I mean, there's still a relatively wide selection of these platforms. It's just that, some of them are so much bigger than others.
No,
but
like we can say, like,
but
people
to have effective freedom of speech, does that depend on how many people you can easily reach?
Yeah, of course. I would say so. Like, I would say that people, for instance, like Fuentes is heading in this direction. Like, people like Milo Yiannopoulos, essentially love him or hate him. And I fucking hate Milo, that little fucking piece of shit, dumb fuck motherfucker, pedophile, homophobic piece of shit. I fucking hate Milo. But that dude essentially lost his freedom of speech, like 100%. Like, that guy's banned from every fucking platform. That dude has like no fucking book. Like, no one's gonna hear him say a single fucking thing for the rest of his life. Like, he's gone. Like, is that okay? I mean,
yeah, I think it is, because it's important to remember, first of all, that the government didn't make this decision. This was private entities making this decision voluntarily about whether they wanted to. And I think it's important to make this decision.
I don't think so. Like, we keep saying like this was private entities. These types of private entities didn't exist. Much the same that when we said like every single U.S. citizen should have their own firearm. This was back when loading a fucking musket thing into a firearm took like 30 seconds for one shot. We didn't have machine guns that were capable of spitting out 30 rounds in 5 seconds. You could just slap another magazine into like instantaneously, right? They might have wrote the law a little bit differently if they knew how powerful firearms would be in the future. And same, like, I think for freedom of speech, the idea that it was conceivable that like one group could literally monopolize like public discourse such that even the president of the United States' main platform of communication is Twitter. It's not a public platform, it's literally Twitter, right? At that point, like, is this really just a private platform that's just a private enterprise? It just has private individuals doing private transactions? Like, it seems pretty integral to the idea or concept of, do you have the freedom of speech, the ability to get a message out to the public uninhibited by the government?
No, I mean, I think that ultimately the notion that it's uninhibited by the government is pretty clear. I mean, and if you're talking about like the power of the press or the power of a particular entity in speech, I mean, that's not something that's new. We had, for example, in the early 20th century, late 19th century, William Randolph Hearst and the so-called yellow press that arguably got us into, that arguably was responsible for the Spanish-American War. So like, we've had powerful press, if not monopolies, a very, very large established press interests that could make and break careers and all of that. I mean, I think the real difference now is comparatively how much easier it is for somebody. I mean, like for people on the internet to be able to develop these large followings relatively quickly on a global scale compared to what they had before. I mean,
yeah, but it's also much harder now for somebody to lose access, or it's much easier now for somebody to lose access to that as well, right?
I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, I guess it is in the sense that it's easier to get banned. And it is in the sense that companies are now starting to, I guess, share notes because they don't want to deal with toxic people, anymore.
I mean, and like, even if we look at like the concept of like freedom of speech, right? Like the concept of freedom of speech kind of exists to protect unpopular speech, right? Like, you don't need laws for popular speech, but like for corporatism, when we talk about these platforms, it's essentially the opposite, right? The popular speech is always going to be protected. What's going to be banned is explicitly the unpopular speech. So it's like literally the opposite of like how we even approach the concept of freedom of speech ideally as well. And like, these are the only public platforms that matter. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we've created new platforms that deal with that. Like when you say the only platforms that matter, presumably you mean the biggest. But like, for example, we all know that these people go to the graveyard for people who get banned is DLive, right?
Yeah, but nobody and you know what's going to happen?
We can't say nobody because it's less people for sure, but we know about it. I think everybody in the chat here knows about it. I mean, I think you've debated people from there before, right?
Yeah, who get like 300 views sometimes. There are a few big DLive people, but you know what's...
Is that a reflection of like, is that a reflection really of the platform? Is it a reflection of the fact that, look, this is where all the Nazis go, from what I understand?
Nope.
And it's just that when that's what you've got, you just don't have as many people watching it.
It's a reflection of corporatism. You want to know why? And I will bet my life on this. If DLive continues to grow, you know what's going to happen? They're going to ban all the Nazis 100%. So no, it's not a reflection of the popularity of the ideas. It's a reflection of what is the most profitable way to run a platform. And like, if we look at the purpose behind why a freedom of speech law is created, which is to protect inherently unpopular speech, that's going to literally run right in the face of what is the most profitable speech to host on a server, right? So these are literally diametrically opposed values of like protecting unpopular speech versus the most corporately safe.
Wait, I have a quick question for you, Steve. In the last 100 years, basically we had newspapers, before we had, Facebook and this shit. Do you think that things were different there? Do you think newspapers would just take stuff that publish anything? Like, hasn't this been the case for a while? That if you had a fringe opinion, that you would essentially get silenced anyways. Like, people weren't
little
using
bit, but
public
like
square.
back then
you
you
could
could.
much easier now to express your Nazi opinions than it was.
Well, no,
say,
because you
know,
start with
years
0
ago.
followers on Facebook and Twitter. Like, no one hears you until you, do outreach. Like, it's just amplification of what you have. But that's always been the case, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but back
I
then,
couldn't
because the
get-
platforms were so much less powerful, you could literally run out and hand out pamphlets, right? That was like a really big way.
But you can't do that today.
Not to the same effect, of course not.
Why?
Like,
It should be the exact same effect. Handing out pamphlets back then versus
that's not
now.
how most people
There's-
get like their information or their news.
No,
right?
I don't disagree, but it would be just as effective now as it was back then. There's
But
no
it
difference.
wouldn't, because the other voices you're competing with now are online. They're in your face 24/7. Back then, like, a pamphlet is competing with another newspaper that might show up, or that somebody has to go out and buy. If anything, the pamphlet might even be more in your face than a newspaper that you would have to go out and purchase.
I'm not doubting that it's more effective. I wonder if you have an entitlement to amplification more than
No,
your,
no way.
Yeah,
No
so
way.
I don't think so
that's,
either.
Like that's the kind of I mean, I just don't see the argument for that. I mean,
You know what it
ultimately,
is?
the
It's like-
reason- if this whole marketplace of ideas means anything, it means that good ideas rise and bad ideas don't. And I think that this disparity in the viewership and on a platform, like D Live versus a platform like, I guess, Twitch, is a reflection.
Okay, wait.
Well,
When you
Bastiat,
say good
you know
idea,
what
wait. When you say good idea, what does good idea mean to you? Because good ideas don't rise on platforms unless it adheres to a certain definition that I'm positive you're not going to give me. But what is a good idea to you? What do you think that means?
I think what I'm saying, I think I tend to hold to the naive belief that over time, more people will adopt those ideas which you and I might refer to as good. So, for example, if you would think that a particular policy is a good idea, then I think over time, I might agree with you. I'm trying to think of something really ordinary, like universal healthcare, for example.
So, like,
right?
I think popular
I
ideas.
think over time these ideas pick up steam, and if they're really worthwhile ideas, then they are adopted by the populace.
Sure, that's
Sometimes
true
takes
to
a
some
long
extent,
time,
but the more important part, the most important part of what you would consider like a popular idea to thrive is that it's corporately safe. That's literally the number one most important thing. Whether an idea is popular or not doesn't matter. What actually matters is, like, is it safe for corporate profits?
As
Like,
in, can I run advertisements over it?
exactly. That's the
Now,
only
that's a
thing that
pretty-
matters.
But that's a pretty wide scope, though, of things you can run advertisements over. I mean, I really like. What is it that's broadly excluded from our political discussion by default, other than things that are basically racist, sexist, and other forms of group-based prejudice?
Well, right now, because of where I'm at on the political aisle, I mean, I would agree that most stuff that's excluded, like I said, I fucking hate Milo Yiannopoulos, but I wouldn't call our current system freedom of speech. I would say that it's heavily curtailed based upon corporate interests. I think that's a more fair summary of our system. And that I would say that if you really want something that's more akin to freedom of speech, you probably would have to get into, like, more heavy regulation of a lot of these very large private platforms that basically dictate what the national dialogue is going to be, to such a level that even, like, world
By that
leaders use
definition,
them.
do you think we ever had freedom of speech in this country?
We had levels of it, but I think that, like, when you're at a level where anybody can get out on a street corner and start shouting at people, or when, like, anybody can, like, hand out pamphlets or whatever, that it was closer there. Whereas right now, like, a single entity can literally, like, slash your presence to, like, almost anybody.
Do you
Well,
view-
now there's one important thing I think to mention here before you say that. Now, the argument, what we're talking about, I think it's important to remember, at least as far as I understand, it seems to apply to a small number of people, because for most people, with small audiences who are just, communicating to each other. For example, the folks in your chat, right, who are talking with each other, right? If they get banned, they just, make a new account and start over, right? Like, for the overwhelming majority of people, this is certainly a golden age of being able to express your opinions, right? So it's only those people out there who want really large audiences and who are, somebody just said, try and ban me, I'll come back. It's really only those people who are going after large audiences, right, who are harmed. So in terms of, like, a greatest good for the greatest number, I think right now we're in a pretty good age there. Beyond that, though, like, in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of what's, like, corporate appropriate, I just don't know that that's ever been, that's probably always been the case. If you're saying, like, you have to put out opinions that advertisers then aren't scared of.
Yeah, but I think we're reaching levels of, like, corporate safetyhood that have never been reached before because of the technologies available to us. So, for instance, like if Don called, Joe like
Mhm.
a bad word in some place, like I don't know how much of that guy's life would have been impacted at the time, unless like the fucking like the whole. Unless he did like some horrible shit, right? Whereas
It's
today,
harder.
like a woman getting mad at somebody at Central Park and saying arguably like racist shit, like you're African American, I'm gonna call the cops. Like her life is probably going to be destroyed now, right? Like we have like technology, we've got the ability to ruin people's lives in ways we've never had before, which I feel like demands some attention to detail. Yeah, I don't know.
One of the things that's kind of interesting. I mean, I get like I'm not trying to say that I don't see any problems with any of this. Like my opinion by default is that I think this situation that we've got now is better than the alternative that you've described, where we would nationalize or have the government heavily involved in deciding who is banned from platforms and things like that. But I mean, I share your discomfort with how easy it seems to be now to basically get a hate mob together on the internet and just kind of ruin somebody's life. Because I mean, it's
Wait, hold on, Steve. Real
it's
quick.
rough. It's pretty miserable.
We acknowledge that sucks, that happened to that lady.
Mhm.
But I think you would agree you can't legislate against that, and that will keep happening.
No, we're not talking about laws or legislation. We're not talking about laws or legislation. We're not talking about laws or legislation. I'm not talking about laws. I'm talking about laws. I'm talking about
I
what we
understand.
ought to socially enforce. Obviously, you can't legislate against that. Take on an employee that's going to cause you massive fucking losses because of no, of course not. I'm not talking about laws. I'm just saying what ought we socially enforce.
How would you socially enforce any of that shit happening?
By conversations like these, where you attack people on Twitter that do certain things, or whatever.
Yeah.
But like basically, it's like moving like public opinion on issues based on what people believe. Yeah.
I guess the thing is, the reason that I'm not closing the door on social enforcement is that I guess I can't extricate it fully from the notion of laws, because in my ideal situation, in terms of freedom of speech, which is basically what we've got now in the United States, I don't have any like legal way to say, okay, stop being a Nazi. But socially, I mean, I can, most people agree that being a Nazi is bad, and so your life can be made more difficult as a result of being a Nazi. And so I guess I feel like when we're talking about really, opinions that basically are just rooted in violence and that fundamentally amount to, I want to ruin the lives of millions of people to realize my political objectives. I mean, it seems pretty reasonable to therefore say, okay, you know what? I voluntarily want to have nothing to do with you as a result of the things that you say or the things you believe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems pretty balanced. I mean, and to the extent that we can think about smaller situations like, okay, well then should I be able to pull the rug out from a Republican? Well, whatever people think about Republicans these days, clearly I'm not a big fan, but it's not on the level of being a Nazi, and the response of people is just not the same. I mean, if you tried the same kind of hate thing against a bunch of Trump supporters, I mean, it's obviously something that more people are comfortable with, and it would be kind of a counter
I understand,
mob,
but
right?
like at this point, like I would pity the conservative that doesn't want to serve a gay man a cake. Like there's so like you're telling me that there might be a guy who has a bakery who doesn't want to serve a cake to a gay guy. I think that's wrong. I think it's bad. It's a protected class, but fuck being a protected class. You shouldn't be able to discriminate against gay people. Now that's not fair. What could be fair, however, is if we find out where that guy lives, we get him canceled from every cell phone plan, we destroy his credit, we get him kicked out of his apartment, we make him lose his business, we make it so no bank ever gives a loan to him. But that is all 100% okay. But God forbid he doesn't serve a gay guy a cake. I don't know, dude. The imbalance of like what's okay just because it's not a protected class is like that's
if you're
such a
gonna have
mismatch.
protected class rules, then I mean, you've already put some rules up, so maybe there's some argument for rules on the other side too. I mean, ultimately, my argument for why protected classes are okay, because ultimately, I feel like they are ultimately an infringement on your freedom of association. I don't know if there's much argument against that, but traditionally, my argument for why they're okay is, well, they're almost all aimed at redressing a historical injustice created by government, racism or sexism or something like that. And so maybe after we've redressed. After we've dealt with racism, through, there were hundreds of years of it in the United States. So maybe after we have these protected classes for a while and have kind of redressed the issue, then maybe someday in the long-term future, maybe there's no more need for that protected class situation. I don't know. But at the moment, I feel like they're totally justified as a kind of, redress for previous harm. The situation you're describing, I guess I don't know. I mean, I can see arguments for some kinds of regulation, like privacy regulation is something that I'm kind of interested in. I know in Europe they have that right to be forgotten sort of thing, where you can pull yourself off of Google search results, things like that. So maybe there's some case for that, like to make it a little easier for people to own their own identity in some fashion and kind of start over. I don't know, but ultimately, I feel like if we're talking about voluntary relationships here, yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's just kind of the price for. That's for the price for expressing, really reprehensible beliefs, is that people can choose that they don't want to associate with you anymore.
Sure. I understand. I totally disagree, but I understand.
Well, what do you, I know you're talking about social restraints here, or social responses. What would be, I guess, what do you think the response would be? Or should
I
be
think
then?
that harm should be limited in your life to the platforms that you fuck up on. That's what I think.
Okay.
If you do something bad in one area, I think that it should be limited to that area, unless you can cause like real demonstrable harm to somebody else.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you're at school, if you like sexually molest like a 9-year-old and you have kids, you should probably lose your kids too, right? Because it's not good.
Right.
But other than that, like if you fuck up at work, you fuck up at work and you're done. But like it almost feels like we're headed to an area where like you're filling out your Burger King application and you have to link like your fucking Twitter and Instagram account to your McDonald's employer account. And if you like skip too many days at work, you're gonna get fucking suspended from Facebook or some shit. Like it feels like we're like in that direction, unironically.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that gets me, I guess, about that is that I do recognize that for the most part, it's not, successful, well-off people who are being punished by, I guess, who are ultimately like making, well, maybe I don't know if we could ever say that for sure. I mean, like the person at issue here was pretty successful and well off. So I'm just thinking that it makes it hard for people who have fallen behind to, I guess, ever catch up. It's just one more thing that makes life harder, is now on top of everything else, you've got to be responsible for your tweets. But look, I think that that's ultimately the price of a voluntary, free society where you have more ways than ever to express yourself. That's really cool. But also, people have more ways than ever to see the kind of ridiculous things you believe. So whereas previously, maybe you would have only expressed your hateful opinions to your friends, now they're out there for the world to see. And I mean, that's just, that's the double-edged sword of it. Anybody can reach anybody in the world, but now anybody can reach you too.
Don't you see the difference between right and ought? Like, yeah, I agree with you 100%. You should have the right to engage in that kind of free transaction society. But there's a difference between that right and the belief that, you should do that. That is how we should conduct ourselves. Like the fact that, well, hold on. It's like, like, hey, you made this racist joke on Twitter and someone screenshotted it. And now it's completely associated with a username that was very easy to find just by searching your regular name, because you never thought this was going to be a fucking problem. And so you did that. And it's like, well, you know what? I see this. And hey, you know what? You have a few people that you'd be in charge of that are people of color. And so now I'm sorry that if they find that, that's hostile and we can't take that on. Is that going to be your fucking future?
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, in
You
some
think it
sense,
should be, is my
unfortunately, in some
question.
other way.
Should it be?
It's to say whether it should or shouldn't be ultimately is so like, feels like such a context sensitive thing to me. Like I would not want to create some kind of hostile work environment for my employees, or I wouldn't want to put my company at any kind of risk of having to deal with that. But I mean, I do recognize that means that once you get dinged, then, your second chances are kind of out.
Actually, Steve, that's a good question, Steve. Do you balance the other employees having this knowledge that something happened, having to continue to work? Like, for instance, let's say that Bastiat made a video on his Twitter of him abusing kittens and like throwing them against the wall and shit. And the people at his work saw that video. Would you hold his employer harmless because like all of his employees are like, dude, I don't want to fucking work with this guy.
No, I think in that case, I'd fire the employee.
So
I'd fire the employee that had the problem. The employee that would come to me and say, I saw bad videos of my other coworker online. I'd say, get the fuck out of here then, motherfucker. Why are you running around trying to find shit for your fucking coworkers online for you to be upset about? You dumb motherfucker. Get the fuck out of here. And I would fire that motherfucker on the spot. You know why? Because that's an employee that's going to give you problems for the rest of your managerial life, because they're always going to be digging around, gossiping, and fucking looking for rumors and shit on fucking employees.
If I
you know
saw
why?
Mr.
You know what?
Mutin
You know what,
throwing
Dan?
cats,
Nope. You know
I'm
why,
reporting
Dan?
that to
I
you.
run my Discord the same way, because sometimes people come to me on Discord and they're like, hey, dude, did you know that some fucking dude, he doxed me, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, shit, he doxed you? Yeah, we banned for that. Like, show me the evidence. Like, okay, here you go. And it's like, wait, where is this from? Oh, it was in another Discord server. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what you do in other Discord servers. If he's fucking killing your whole family in another Discord server, he could be calling in fucking ISIS bombs on your family, and I don't in a video game, and I don't fucking care. If it's out of my Discord server, I don't give a fuck, because as soon as I start banning for shit that happens outside my Discord server, I have to babysit every single fucking stupid thing that every motherfucker does outside Discord. So like, if I get an employee, somebody that comes up to me and is like, I'm really uncomfortable working with John over there. Why? Because John goes to a Baptist church that's really homophobic, and I'm gay. Well, fuck you, dude. I'm sorry. Is John homophobic to you at work? Does he do fucked up shit to your work? Because if not, I don't give a fuck what John does in his free time. I don't pay him to go to church. I don't pay him on Sunday.
Is there any line where you would fire someone for doing something fucked up? What about if this guy was an actual like practicing fucking pedophile and you didn't want to be around?
I would say no, only in the case where it's work relevant. So for instance, like I probably wouldn't hire a pedophile to run the kids section of like an Old Country buffet, right? Or I wouldn't hire like a fucking murderer to be a police officer, or I wouldn't hire some guy that's a pyromaniac to be a firefighter, right? If it's like work relevant and it's going to impede your ability to perform your job, that's fine. However, impede your ability to perform your job does not include your coworkers are uncomfortable with you.
So there's essentially, as long as it's not, that's crazy.
It was basically the point that I was making, though, is that people will respond as they see fit. And those out there who think, look, this isn't a big deal, will just not respond. And those who do think it's a big deal will respond. And everybody gets what they want. And if you don't want the risk, just don't say disreputable, monstrous things on a global platform.
Well, there's a disconnect here because Steven's answering this as the employer in his personal views. The better question is, do you think it's reasonable that someone that runs a company with many employees would put the needs of the many employees who would feel uncomfortable, maybe not want to continue to work there if a certain person is there? Would you sacrifice many employees to keep one guy who is maybe an asshole on board? Because that would go against market forces, wouldn't it?
Hold on. There's a difference between how we think things ought to be versus how they are. Right? So in the fact of how things are today, you would have to fire the employee, because if not, then the motherfucker that has a problem is going to rally up every other employee. They're going to get on Facebook. They're going to fuck your whole company up. Of course you would. I'm just saying that, like...
So in a world with no Facebook and no Twitter...
Yeah, then you just keep them. And if employees are like trying to find reasons to have problems with other employees because of shit they do off the clock, fuck them. I don't give a fuck about some dumbass employee that's running around trying to find reasons to be upset at another employee for shit that happens off the clock. Fuck that shit.
Wouldn't you end up having inferior employees, as some of them obviously would leave your employment?
Maybe I'd have superior employees because they've learned that they only exist with me on the clock and they don't have to go and fucking baby and legislate and snitch and tattle to me about shit that other workers do off the clock. That's some shit that I never want to be involved in dealing with.
Wait, okay, so don't you have a responsibility to your shareholders to provide maximum value? And if
Different question. The answer is yes. I already agree with you. Of course, if we live in a society
Hold on. So if we agree that you have to derive maximum value, if I could prove to you that having the attitude you have does not create maximum value, would you then agree that what you're saying is wrong, is bad for the business, even in a world with no Twitter and no Facebook?
Sure, Dan.
All right, well, there we go then.
Whoa. Well, look, I mean, I think that it's again worth remembering that this seems to be primarily a problem for people with really big audiences, and that for most people it's just not really an issue. For most people, have got more ability to speak more freely than ever, and beyond that, there may be some areas where like maybe we should think about like. Should credit agents, should we, like, for example, what if some private entity wanted to start creating some kind of social credit scoring system? How that might work. I don't know. But
well, you're already supporting that, right? Like that's what you're already in favor of.
I mean, in a sense, I mean, I guess if you were to challenge me with some of the specific implications of that, maybe I would feel like there might be some case for some regulation or something. But broadly speaking, I think the point you just made that, look, I wouldn't fucking give a care what you're doing outside of work. I don't give a damn. I mean, I don't think that that's some minority opinion. I think that the opinion you've just expressed, in addition to being one that I imagine you really believe in, is also probably the easiest opinion to hold, right? Just focus on your own business. Other people's business, if it doesn't affect me, I don't care, right? And I think that's a pretty common position. I don't think, for example, that most landlords are going to respond to a Twitter mob and say, well, you know what? When your lease is up in 8 months, you can't come back. I think that for the most part, this is just not a massive issue.
I just don't think we gain much from the crazy fucking mobs. I don't know. I don't think it makes society better.
It does seem to be. It does. Like, I don't know that it really makes anybody better. I mean, it doesn't seem to be resolving these problems since they keep, the same thing, the same exact script seems to keep happening. So I don't know. Yeah.
Bastiat,
The reality is that
When we talk
canceling
about
is the
comfort-
only social deterrence such defense minorities have. Steven's taking someone who doesn't call to speak at work and shit. So if somebody does it to you at work, you can obviously fire them for it. You're never getting unbanned. I recognize your name and you say so many stupid fucking things in chat, okay? I hope you get fired from your fucking job for how fucking stupid you are. Somebody can find out where that guy works. The fact that he typed that slur in my chat, I'll forward it to his fucking boss. Because I should be able to do that, because I guess that's what we do now, right? And we'll see if his boss wants to fucking fire him in a video game. You are ecstatic
not.
to watch
Who told
America
you?
let you
Did I
right
say
now.
that?
Yeah, you're like, oh, we
Did I
can't do
say
anything
that?
better. Like you sound you sound so pathetic. How you look at your